Every decade of Disney animated movies since the 1930s. Disney has been producing feature-length animated movies since the 1930s, and the studio has gone through some ups and downs over the years. Although the best animated Disney movies are beloved by people of all ages across the globe, there have been some difficult periods in the studio's history. When people think of Disney classics, they mostly think of musical hits from the 1990s or pioneering gems from the 1940s or 1950s. Other decades tend to be forgotten about. Just about every decade of Disney's history has produced something worth watching, but it's been a roller coaster, to say the least. Disney only made one feature-length animated movie in the 1930s, but it was the first film of its kind ever made. Snow White represented the culmination of the studio's artistic and technical innovation up until that point. It's still heralded as a true animated classic. Had Disney made any more films before the end of the decade, the 1930s might have ranked higher, but it's hard to vouch for the strengths of one movie over 5 or 6 from another decade, even if Snow White is a landmark of animation and a heartwarming classic. The middling response to 2025's Snow White underlines that Disney's live-action remakes struggle to live up to the quality of the classics. We're halfway through the decade now, but Disney has yet to produce a single animated movie in the 2020s that has the potential to go down in history as a true classic. While Encanto and Raya and The Last Dragon received generally positive reviews, they still don't compete with the best that Disney has to offer. Disney's recent animated successes have been balanced out by a couple of duds. Strange World was a notorious flop, and Wish didn't live up to its billing as a celebration of the studio's last century. There's still time for things to change, and Disney's upcoming movies could see the 2020s rise through the rankings, starting with Zootopia 2 and Frozen 3. The 1970s and 1980s are often referred to as Disney's dark ages, as the studio failed to recapture the magic in the years following Walt Disney's death. Disney produced just 3 animated movies in the 70s, none of which typically rank among their greatest hits. The Aristocats, Robin Hood, and The Rescuers all share a charming art style, and one could argue that they're a little underrated. They feel very much as though they're caught between 2 distinct eras of Disney's ambitions, but there's a lot to love in these 3. Disney became a little more prolific in the 1980s, although the decade still didn't yield many true classics. Movies like The Fox and the Hound and The Great Mouse Detective fared reasonably well with critics, and they've become cult classics for people of a certain age. Disney also produced a few critical flops in the 80s, such as Oliver and Company and The Black Cauldron. The real saving grace in this mixed bag was The Little Mermaid. It arrived right at the end of the decade, signaling the end of the Dark Ages and the beginning of a new era. Disney only produced 3 animated movies in the 1960s, with Walt Disney's death in 1966 throwing the studio into disarray. However, there isn't a single miss in these 3 movies. The Sword in the Stone is probably the weakest, but it's still better than much of what came in the 70s and 80s. The Jungle Book and 101 Dalmatians deserve their critically acclaimed status. Their cozy art style is rather unique among Disney's canon, but it gives them endless rewatch value. With great stories and memorable characters to match, they make up for Disney's scarce production in the 60s. Disney's animated movies from the 2000s are a strange mixture of the old and the new. As other studios had already moved on to 3D computer-generated animation, Disney was still making 2D hand-drawn feature films. Disney tried to catch up with 2005's Chicken Little, one of the studio's most infamous duds. What's interesting is that Disney's best movies of the 2000s are the ones that don't try to chase the trends in animation. Lilo and Stitch and The Emperor's New Groove both came out at least 5 years after Toy Story, but they're hilarious and beautifully rendered. Treasure Planet and Atlantis. The Lost City are interesting artifacts from a brief period between the old style and newer trends, but the late 2000s were stuffed with disappointing 3D movies. The early 1940s were the peak of Disney's first wave of innovation, when the studio was miles ahead of the rest of the world in terms of feature-length animation.